One of those things you worry that you'll forget, even though it's like the most basic thing.
The most important part.
Yeah, like I took a nap earlier and I recorded something, and then like I had it clipped on because I don't normally clip it on me. I usually hold it up, and my mic was on me. And I woke up and went outside to do something, and I was like, "What's this little fuzzball?" It was like the little mic, like the buffering thing, and it like had fallen off, and I was like, "Oh wait!" And it was like still on me, and I was like, "I'm walking around with a mic." Um,
Luckily, mine is wedged to my computer, so I can't do anything like that.
I know your setup is very, very professional. I was just like, oh, I'm used to interviewing musicians, and I'm like, yours is like so far beyond like the production level. I'm just like, wow, there's a bit of pressure there.
Nah, no pressure, no pressure. This is just nerding out about like tech gear and all that kind of stuff. I just buy this stuff. I don't even know how to use most of this stuff, to be honest. But I just got it because I was like, oh, it looks cool, and I kind of look better than a webcam, so I just got it.
I will have to say, your like reels, it looks amazing. Like when I look at it, I'm just like, first of all, this is amazing. And then I'm like, and second of all, incredible content, but obviously for very good purposes. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know if my camera looks a little bit flat because it's in log, so I record in like the flat color base. But does it look okay? Do you want me to change it?
No, that's totally fine. It looks fine.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yeah. I'm okay with it. It looks great.
Oh,
cool. Well, let's just jump right into it because you're obviously on a bit of a time crunch.
Yeah.
Sunshine, just jumping in and quickly letting you know that this is a disclaimer that this is a more serious topic video, and there is going to be mentions of serious mental health and self-harm. So just be warned, if this will trigger you or make you feel uncomfortable, please be advised when you view this particular interview.
Sunshine, welcome back to another episode of Heartablazepodcast podcast. Today we have a very special guest and a very important topic. So today's episode is more like an open, honest conversation aimed at bringing to light the stigmas and daily challenges those living with depression face. I'm incredibly honored to have Ryan join us as a guest. So let's welcome Ryan Darani. I hope I said that right.
You did. You nailed it. I was surprised to actually hear you nail that, to be fair. A lot of people call me Darani, or like Americans get it really wrong. So you nailed that.
With the accent to Darani.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, that's good. I mean, considering that I gave you an entire wrong name when I reached out to you.
You did. I was like, is this
like,
for me?
And I was like,
I respect the hustle. I was thinking, maybe you just were reaching out to loads of people and you just carry one of the names over, but I'm glad it wasn't that.
Yeah. Well, you were half right. So basically I was in the process of pitching the idea, but I do them individually because I voice record whenever possible. I think for some reason, some people's first messages can be voice recordings and some people don't accept that. But I think because when I switched to yours, I was doing voice to text, and voice to text is notorious for changing things.
Yeah, being pretty bad.
Your name's not Ryan, so
yeah.
So that's what happened there.
Oh, good. We're here now.
Yes, we finally got there. So I want to say I have followed your channel for a little bit. It's not like super long time, but it's been a little bit, probably like I think at least a couple of weeks before that. And I admire how you make like mental health education so accessible, because it's quite an important thing. Like what you're doing is kind of not just you offer comfort, and you also encourage sort of a safety and tackle the stigmas at the same time. And like that's a lot on a plate of someone who's actually experienced it before. I mean, you have to be the kind of person to actually do that because, without the experience, it's very, very different. Like I have actually, I don't think I mentioned this year, I have actually had depression, and I kind of got out of it last year pretty soon. I think my time frame's a lot shorter than everyone else's, but it was like kind of intense when it happened. So I can understand how quickly it goes from like a little spark to kind of a wildfire situation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way I like to describe it, I always say to anyone who starts talking about mental health with me, I always say, this is how I experienced it. I said, before that, I always cared about it, but you come from like an empath situation, and then you go, okay, I understand the symptoms, I understand what's happening. But then once you actually go through it, you're just like, once you have it and you know that you have it, you go, holy shit, I've like completely got this wrong. Like this is just like, it's not like a textbook thing. It's like I had just like kind of like on paper, like description, like you have a like a rough idea of it, but it's absolutely like in a different ballpark when you're actually experiencing it.
It is. It's funny because I've had pretty much that exact conversation within the last 7 days with somebody who was pretty ignorant to depression. So they didn't believe it was a real thing. They didn't really understand why it would like cause people to take days off work or cause them to stay in bed. And then like they went through some form of trauma and they went through a bout of depression, which lasted, you know, a significant amount of time for them. And they just said, you know, the newfound level of sympathy and respect for people who carry it every single day was completely miles away from what they would ever have considered before they experienced it. I think it's kind of like anything. You have to really experience it before you can describe it.
Exactly.
There's some things you can describe without going through it, but depression is definitely not one of them.
Like I often relate like hand in hand because I'm trying to like bring more sort of rights into like the podcast as well. And one of the other rights I often talk about is like women's rights. And I think it's got a lot of things that overlap with mental health. It's the same thing. Like you can vouch for women's right as a dude all you want, but like, let's be honest, you'll never fully understand the grasp and full extent of it as a man because the whole idea is because most of the issues kind of start with us anyway. So it's like that same kind of idea. It's like you'll understand it, but you won't actually fully understand it.
100%.
Yeah. So I thought it would be nice to kind of just like lightly touch on it. You don't have to go into too much detail, but it would be interesting to kind of share our backgrounds, I guess, like in terms of how we grew up and like how mental health kind of plays into it. I guess like depending on whether you had anyone in the family that had history with that, or was there anything that, I know, as you grew up that kind of pushed you in that direction to contributing to kind of like experiencing mental health issues?
Yeah, so I would largely say that my first experience with, I would say maybe the effect of a mental health condition rather than the mental health condition itself. I didn't really understand it that much when I was a kid. But my mum was pretty heavy, like a substance abuser. And that was directly correlating, even though she didn't really figure that out until recently, it was directly correlated to her having some form of depression. I don't still quite understand what it is from. And I don't think until she's ready to have that conversation with me, she would ever tell me. And she has never told me, but the initial kind of experience was, you know, substance abuse. I could see that she was unhealthy, unhappy. I went through, and I don't know how deep we can go, and if this is, you know, triggering, you can cut this out, but trigger warning if not. I saw. Okay, cool. So my mum had tried to commit suicide a number of times when I was a kid. That obviously had a big impact on me. And it was around, I was 15, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And then 2 years later, I was diagnosed with depression. I don't think they do that the same anymore. They don't actually give you a clinical diagnosis in the UK. They just say, I think you have it. But when I was like 17, 18 years ago now, that's when I initially had my my first diagnosis. And it's because I was going through panic attacks. It was because I was angry all of the time. It's because I couldn't control my emotions. I was self-harming. I didn't really understand why at the time. And then I went to the doctors and understood what was the cause of it. And it's taken me, you know, nearly 20 years to kind of figure it out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, no kid like at that age should be even like exposed to half of those stuff. So like, no wonder you have like, cause you know, I think that's the thing. You see a lot of videos where young kids kind of watch their parents like do something for another part, like another spouse. Like, you know, like for example, I've seen a video where husband lifts a carpet whenever the wife starts vacuuming, and then the kids started doing it. And similarly, I think for negative things, it's like you learn how to regulate from your parents. Like I was saying I recently did an intake for psychologists for my anxiety. So I have really bad anxiety, apparently. And she was like, because when I did that, they were like, oh yeah, depression, now it's like at 3, 5, it's not bad. anxiety and stress is 14 though. And I was like, is that bad? I was like, that sounds
Is that
bad. I was like, that number sounds high. I was like, is this out of 10? But yeah, and when I was talking to the psychologist, that's what I was like talking about. I was just like, oh, you know, the funny thing I've noticed with patterns is I used to hate my mum for getting really like, she's a great mom, you know, but she's very, very anxious and warrior kind of person, especially traveling. She used to like get so amped up. And I was just like, it's making it really hard for everyone else to relax because you're freaking us out. But then as I got older, I noticed that I'm displaying this very similar traits of like anxiousness and worrying. And I'm like, how funny is that? It's like, it's the trait that I didn't like the most, but I've carried it on. And then when we talked about like how much of it could be genetics and also how much of it is like imprints and stuff. But that's what I think, like regulating your emotions largely can also come from like our environment and how we're raised. And, you know, if your parents aren't present to show you how, what are your options? You know, like you're left to kind of figure it out on your own.
Yeah, you're kind of forced to grow up a lot quicker than you should. So I feel like that the 50-50 split that a lot of the people I speak to through my page, they've experienced something as an adult, you know, a breakup, losing a loved one, you know, some people lose their identity as they kind of turn into an adult. And then the other half is I was forced to grow up too young because of, you know, I inherited somebody else's trauma and I had to learn to deal with it because they hadn't yet learned to deal with it. And it just kind of like, it just gets passed down. So yeah, I completely get that.
Yeah, and like when you mentioned like substance abuse in terms of like your mom's situation, I can say like I have read somewhere because I've done my own research because I also used to have substance abuse problems. You know, a lot of problems. I remember reading about it, and it was saying that a very good way to summarize it is people who turn to substance for substance abuse generally. One interesting in research was apparently ADHD people are more prone to getting addiction. The second point was it's the way they describe it medically is it's a failed attempt to medicate yourself for whatever you're suffering from. So, you know, it could be anxiety, it could be like trauma, but it's a way to kind of try to like, I don't want to say heal a hole, it's more like trying to heal a wound, but you don't know how to do it properly. And you kind of get into this cycle of obviously failing, but then like being stuck in this cycle of up and down, trying to get into a state of like, oh, I feel better. And then you're like, not feeling better. And then like, I think my depression was clinically more like a case where it got to the point where I got into a cycle of where I was using the stuff and then I felt like I was a different person. And then I was like, oh, I don't like who I am. And I was like, is this maybe who I actually am? Or am I like, like, you know, you get into the confused state and then you kind of go, maybe this is who I am. And like, maybe I'm not a good person or maybe I shouldn't be around. And then, you know, you lose friends, you lose circles, then you start to isolate, etc. And then it got to the point where I used too much. Then I think like because of the damage to your mental state, like it kind of spirals downwards so much. At one point I ended up in the hospital, but I was irresponsive to like anyone. Like the person was like, oh, hey, what's your name? I'm just going to take some blood samples. Is that okay? And I was just like, I just like stared at the ceiling. I didn't say anything. And I was just like, in hindsight, I was like, yeah, that must be really, really like alarming. I was like, that's really bad. And yeah,
it is.
Like, he was just mentioning like afterwards they said displayed symptoms of depression, but like just like irresponsiveness and stuff.
I mean, hearing all of that, I obviously didn't know that prior to the call, but I feel like to look back on that and in your kind of your own words, it's not really that short. It wasn't that long ago. And for you to be where you are now, because you seem, again, this is just a guess, you seem happier, you seem healthier. You're able to talk about these things, which a lot of people, I feel like that a lot of people don't like talking about it. For me, it was uncomfortable for a long, long time to say the things out loud that I currently do now say out loud. And that in of itself, and I don't think a lot of people give themselves credit for that, being able to speak about something that hurts you or haunts you is a massive step forward. And it's really good to see for you that you're no longer in that place. So like podcast aside, dude, like huge fucking well done. Be like massively proud of yourself.
Yeah, I think like that's why when I found your channel, I was like, part of me was like, would it be insensitive to ask about inviting you on on a like a, it's like essentially like a talk show, essentially to lift your old wounds in a way, but it is fundamentally for an educational purpose and because you're comfortable with it. Obviously, that's why I was like, I'll probably make that effort and ask because what's the worst that can happen? You can always say no.
Exactly.
And yeah, it is a sensitive subject. Let me see. So, and one of the things we did want to talk about, I did want to bring up as well, and I think you do mention on your channel, is like depression is kind of a spectrum. It's not like the downright, like your symptoms are going to be like A, B, C, D. It's like someone could experience like, this type of like range of stuff, and then somebody else might not even experience anything along that same line. But like for me, like I experienced all that typical sort of like emptiness and like, I don't know if I remember when I first started getting depression, one of the scenes from a show that I didn't watch, but I remember the scene really well. I forget the actor's name, but it's called Afterlife from Netflix, I think.
Oh, Ricky Gervais.
Yes. Do you know the scene I'm talking about where he's like, basically says like, I kind of like, these days I'm not like who I am anymore, and I'm trying to be who I am. I kind of impersonate a version of myself because like at least what I remember I used to be, but I just like I can't do that anymore. Stuff like that, and it got me so emotional. And then like I saw it again the other day, and it was like I think it was Mental Health Week, and it popped up again, and I was looking at it, and I was just like, God, it's still so like intense, even like after I'm like all good now and looking at it, I can still remember how like intense that feeling was. Because like there's nothing scarier than remembering exactly how you feel when you're normal. That's the thing that's most challenging about, I think, depression. Like you remember exactly who you are and how you are, but you don't feel that way anymore. And you don't know how to fix that. Like, or like feel like, like the whole idea is like, I don't think you're supposed to fix that. You're supposed to kind of understand it and kind of move forward and become like a newer version of yourself. And I think a lot of people are trying to revert back to like a previous version.
Yeah. No, I think that is, at least for me, the loss of, outside of the stuff that I talk about online, I am a very obsessive person and I always say to my friends and people that know me, I don't operate in the gray area of anything. I am an extreme one way or the other. That is just my personality. Are you the same too?
Yeah, I would go 100% into something, or I will just like, nah, I'm not into it at all.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I give myself literally 15 minutes to figure something out. If I don't like it, I put it in the bin and I move on. I'm like, this is how I am.
Attitude though, because you move through like a lot of hobbies probably pretty quickly, and you'll find all the stuff you like.
Yeah, it's good in a way because I pick things up, learn new things, experience new things, and then I'm like, oh, that was a waste of time, and then I move on. I'm kind of like, I'm a bit like a dog in that sense. I like what I like, and anything else outside of that, you'll know very quickly that is not for me. And going back to that piece that Ricky Gervais said is, I want to get back to the person who I used to be. That loss of identity has played a massive role in what has affected me, because I believed for such a long time, outside of the issues I had when I was a kid, that my self-worth was contingent on how successful I was, how much value I brought to other people, what materialistic things could I provide to the world around me. And it didn't have any purpose. There was no fulfillment in that. It was literally robot on autopilot, just doing what I believed was correct to try and get away from the person I used to be, which was just an angry, aggressive young kid. I was going through all of this trauma, and my identity was attached to that. I was like, this is how people know me. I'm aggressive. I'm angry. I'm nasty to people. I lash out because at the time I didn't know what I was dealing with. Yeah. And I tried in the wrong way to go back to who I was before all of the trauma, but it was so long ago that I had forgotten who he was. And in the process, you learn, the way that I describe it is, you kind of have to like, I don't know, it's a very weird concept, but if you've ever seen the movie Inception, where they kind of like stretch the dimensions out, and they can piece them back together however they want. I feel like when you're trying to figure out who you are again, at least for me, I had to like really pull myself apart. I had to really kind of, in a non-graphical sense, I had to really kind of tear myself to shreds and say, which parts of me needs to die, and which part of me do I want to keep, and which part of me do I want to invent? And once I let go of that person who I used to be, or the person I was trying to be, and I could figure out who I wanted to be now, it made everything so much easier, because I don't think we ever want to be who we used to be. I think we want a version of that, but just an improved version.
Yeah, and I feel like that segues really nicely into, I saw, because I went through all your reels and I was looking at like things that you brought up to like the surface, and I was like, okay, like this one I found very, very interesting. It's the one where you talked about inclusiveness, that you wanted to, like, a big part of lying is because you want to stay included. And like, and I feel like, you know, like it's interesting because, you know, for me, like when things got really bad, the main issue was I isolated a lot. So like when I had this image of, I want to present the same version that people like, which I know people like a lot. So I was like, okay, the bubbly version, the friendly version, the one who helps people. I was like, but this new version that I'm like happening to me right now, so I don't want people seeing that. So whenever I got into like, you know, a high and then it started to come down and then like was like in this like headspace, I just try to lock myself in my apartment. I just wouldn't want to like tell people, and I struggled to talk about it because I'm like, oh, it's so embarrassing, and also like I don't want people to know about this side of me. But then like I remember also coming across someone's post who was a trauma survivor, and she made this really interesting point. She said, my hardest lesson and the most valuable lesson I can offer to you is that after coming out of this was I learned that in order to move forward, you had to remember that you need to hold space for the version that you no longer want as well. So she says, for example, the broken version, it's essentially in a way to acknowledge like what's happened. So facing it, but you don't destroy them completely, but instead you allow them to be in presence of like the newer version of you, because they are, you know, they are essentially a part of you that kind of, I guess, like molds into like the new version, if that kind of makes sense, I guess. I don't really know how to describe that part, but you get the point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it makes sense. 100% that, you know, there's, if you take that and put it into any other lens, for example, I used to have problems with my weight, and it would impact me a lot, but I still, and, you know, I'm not that person anymore. I take health and fitness very serious today, but I didn't before, but I still hold on to that person because they deserved better from me. And I don't ever want to let that part go of me, because I'll use that as either when I need to be kind to myself, I can, or try to. And then if I don't want to fall back into the, you know, how I felt when I was that way, then I use that again as a reminder to be like, right, I still remember who this person was, and I don't want to be like that. Or I remember who this person was and think how much kinder I needed to be to myself to get out of that position. So I'll hold on to them as long as I need to.
Yeah, and I feel like when we talk about insecurities and, you know, depression and trying to be included, like the inclusiveness, I think a lot of like things, something that people don't realize a lot is depression can also be very contextual. It's like triggers. It's like, you know, it can happen very drastically and very quickly because of something. And it wouldn't always be there. And masking obviously being a very, very particular thing that happens all the time. One sec. Sorry, I'm recording.
Right.
Do you mind waiting till later? Sorry, my flatmate.
That's all good.
But I would love you like to expand a little bit on like the inclusiveness, like when you talk about like lying to be included, like what were you specifically kind of referring to in terms of, say, was it your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, pretty much up until probably, I want to say like, not even like 18 months ago, 12 months ago, probably not long ago at all. Most of my, and I would say close friends, they didn't know what was going on with me, because to be honest, I would be like, respond, yes, I'll go, yes, I'll come, you know, because I felt, and you mentioned it actually earlier, I felt so isolated and lonely all of the time that I was trying my best to make sure that I didn't contribute to that, even though it meant I was pretending to be somebody else, which was incredibly painful. And to be honest, it probably is the reason why I lost a lot of friends, because I would force myself out of the loneliness to not be kind of excluded from things. But at the same time, because I was kind of holding in somebody that I really was, I would at times become abrasive and become a bit confrontational, because I knew deep down I was really desperate to let these people know I'm fucking struggling right now. And I'm only here because if I wasn't here, I'd be at home and God knows what would happen.
Yeah.
So the inclusiveness for me was kind of like, it tried to serve two purposes. One was to protect me from being alone, because that was when things used to spiral for me. And the second thing was in some kind of feeble attempt that I would gain the confidence to just let people know, hey, I don't really want to be here anymore. And it was only through that I started to learn that, kind of, again, going back to what you said at the start, people don't really understand, or they don't know how to respond to people when they say things like, dude, I don't want to be here anymore. I think about driving my car into a truck pretty much every single day, and I don't feel emotional about it. It's just, it is what it is. People either think you're joking, which I wasn't, but I would say it joking because that was my attempt. Yeah, like humor for me was my attempt to be serious. It was weird. I would say things, you know, real dark, like dark humor, right?
Yeah, you go, and then they'll be like, yeah, and then, but then that would make it difficult to continue that conversation.
Exactly. So the inclusiveness part for me was a safety mechanism to protect me from being alone. And the second thing was really my, brain tried to produce a little bit of confidence to say, actually, you've got the courage to tell these people you're not feeling so great. And I just feel like it was painful to do, and it was a mistake in a lot of cases, but then in others it wasn't. So I think deep down, people who have depression, at least speaking from my own experience, the last thing we ever want to feel, because we do anyway, is excluded or alienated or different or weird. So that's why I always try to do my best to, I guess, be quote unquote normal.
Yeah, that's another thing that's really hard. Like, we always kind of judge ourselves so harshly, and we kind of go like, oh, we're not normal. And we like make all these kind of like judgments before other people. Like, I went to a knitting class recently. It's funny, I know, like bringing knitting class into this, but the first thing she told me was, oh no, this was actually there was a therapist that I was talking to, the psychologist, and she said, when I was describing a lot of things that happened, that why I think it led to the anxiety and like sort of like trauma and stuff. And she said, okay, I'm just going to stop you quickly though. She's like, I'm noticing a lot of this is judgment coming from you. Nobody's actually said that to you. She's like, have you noticed that? And I was like, oh shit. And she was like, yeah. She's like, so if you think about it, she's like, what I'm seeing is you're feeling like you're trying to prove yourself very, very quickly and very, very like drastically, but nobody's like forcing you to do that. Nobody's asking you to do that. And just like, and it's something to worth exploring. And I was just like, oh, and I was like, and she was like, just try to calm down, bring your shoulders down. And that's why the knitting class came in. As soon as I started trying to learn knitting, she was like, I'm just going to start by saying, drop your shoulders. And I was like, oh. And she was like, yeah, relax. She's like, you're supposed to have fun with this. Just like, enjoy yourself. And I was just like, I already know she's a great teacher.
Yeah. Enjoy myself. How do I do that?
But that actually, everything that you just said, like, actually makes me think an interesting thing that worth considering for, I mean, like, whoever's watching out there, like, that manages like people in wanting to improve mental health, especially among men. I think an interesting thing to do would be opening a workshop, not focused around like necessarily dealing with conversations only, but also a workshop for people who may struggle and how to start the conversation. Yeah. Because it's as important as like it is to receive and kind of explore how to talk to someone who's come out and told you like, look, I'm struggling. I think it's even harder to navigate that path of getting to the point of saying, hey, we're friends, right? I'm really struggling. I don't know what's wrong with me, or like I don't know what to do, or like we need to have a chat. Like, it's all really difficult ways to kind of start a conversation. And I think men are particularly prone to using humor to navigate difficult conversations, but that's also a typical example of where things go wrong, because that's how a normal conversation goes too. So people won't know what's wrong, and they'll think you're just like shitting me, mate. You know, like, oh, you're doing the same thing as usual. And then go, ha ha, go and sit in the corner and just like go dark and quiet. I used to tell when things were really bad, I was trying to describe it when I went into the hospital, and I used to use the term, and I said, this is a term I've come up with because it seems to be the only term that really makes me feel like it's describing accurately. And I used to say it's caught in the limbo.
Yep.
And I said, like, you understand what I mean straight away, right? Like I said, it
100%.
feels like just like just suspended in space. You have no grounding, you have no feelings, you have no like something like tied to you. You just feel like you're suspended in nowhere, like in the dark. And like once you get to that stage, it's like it's super challenging to kind of even like, and then you were talking about like inclusiveness and being normal. I said like, for me, one of the things that made it really challenging was because then you're very quickly, for example, we're going into sort of more like, I guess, like substance abuse territory, but you would very quickly be followed by, if you were going like to use it, you'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I did it because I wanted to feel good. So I'm kind of selfish. And then you would kind of want to call a friend, but then you'd be followed by, I shouldn't do that because that's going to make them deal with your issues and your like responsibilities. And then you'd be like, oh, I'm a bad person. Then you kind of go down this other spiral. And it's just like all these negative things going hand in hand. And I think that's what makes it very, very challenging. And depression has a lot of like similar traits in terms of that, where you just, you know, like you always have people saying like, oh, they left a letter because they didn't want to be troubling anyone anymore. They didn't want to be a burden. But then you always have the other side of the story constantly coming out, trying to convince people that you are not a burden and, you know, we love you. And one of the strongest sentences I've ever heard is, just because you don't feel the love doesn't mean that you're not loved. Like, because in depression, your reality is a perception and it's distorted. So you can't understand the feeling of the love, but it is there. And it's hard to tell them to logically try to keep it there, because like, you know, if you don't feel it, it's very hard to convince feelings.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things I still have. I still don't. I don't have the ability to feel in general. I think that is the byproduct of all of the things that I've gone through as a defense mechanism to kind of shut off that ability to be or feel things so deeply, because it would inevitably cause me more pain. And even to this day, I'm not on medication now, but it reminds me of when I was, is that I'm just so flat. Like something dramatic can happen, I'm not happy. Something terrible can happen, I'm not overly sad. I just have this real kind of, you know,
it's mellow.
I wouldn't
like
say,
it's very mellowed out.
It's very, it's mellow to the point where it feels like I have forgotten, or I don't have the ability to have emotions anymore. I don't have the ability to feel anymore. All of the stuff that I've experienced or talk about and, you know, dive deep into are from firsthand experiences and the things that I still experience to this day. And the only way I'm able to feel them is to talk about them, because I can't experience the same emotion. So when you say, you know, you said that just because you don't feel the love doesn't mean that you aren't loved, is super accurate, because it could be the same thing for a friendship. Just because you feel like you don't have friends doesn't mean that you don't. And that is, I would say, in my opinion, obviously people are different, but subjectively, that is the worst thing depression has done to me, is that it makes me believe things that aren't necessarily true, and it has stunted my ability to feel like a normal person would.
Yeah. So like, let's tackle that a little bit, because that's a very, like, I obviously have come out of that pretty okay, because that was more like a temporary sort of contextual like issue that I had at the time. But obviously my symptoms weren't as terrible. So it was a bit easier to regulate over time. But like, if someone was in your position, like dealing with similar sort of like aftermath conditions, to sort of like try to work their way through it, obviously with relationships and all that, you need to build that, all that. How would you suggest them to kind of go about nurturing that and kind of like bringing some of that back? Like, has anything worked for you?
I've tried a lot. The thing that didn't work and hasn't worked yet is being too self-critical, because you can't hate yourself into loving yourself again. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just a paradox. You can't, you can't beat yourself up and then hope one day to wake up feeling fantastic about it.
Yeah.
The way that I wouldn't necessarily, I haven't come out of it. I still feel the way that I feel. The way that I've managed to accept it is recognize, it's like anything, I'm not the greatest at math. It just is what it is. I'm not brilliant with numbers. I can either hate myself for it, or I can just accept that that's just who I am as a person, right? And the emotional aspect of not being able to feel certain things, or maybe you have different compounding effects after coming out of a depressive episode, whatever it might be, is to not hate yourself for it immediately, because it is part and parcel of getting better. You have to accept that it is what it is. The other thing is, you're never going to go back to feeling how you used to feel. So doing the things that you used to do to feel a certain type of way aren't going to work anymore. So I started to introduce, I would probably use the word chaos into my life in a very controlled way. So not substance abuse, nothing crazy. But I would try new things that would in a kind of, engage my brain. So that I could
put you out of your comfort zone almost, right?
100%, because
Really good,
if I was to ever try and feel the things that I felt doing the things that got me into that position in the first place, it's never going to work. And the biggest thing that has helped me, and it's a bit weird, it's a bit niche, but it just works for me, is I do jiu-jitsu. Now, if you've never done jiu-jitsu, and I'm sure most people haven't,
it's pretty intense, I've heard.
It's intense, and it's the only time of the day where the only thing I think about is surviving whatever it is that I'm going through. Because in the moment, if you have a lapse in concentration, if you drift off and think about how you felt 3 hours ago, you're going to end up in a lot of turmoil. You're going to be hurt. And that engagement, that discipline, that humility, that ability to feel something physical was the only thing that has allowed me to kind of inject serotonin back into my life. And that little bubble, 2 hours a day, has made the world of difference. I'm not looking for 24 hours of perfection. I'm looking for 2 hours of serotonin that I can then feed off of for the next 6 hours. So that's what's worked for me.
Yeah, and I think that brings up 2 or 3 really good points that I want to make obvious for people listening. Is one, from a psychologist's point of view, I will probably say I'm not a psychologist obviously, but I'm saying my psychologist that I saw for the intake, that's probably a really, really good approach, because one of the first things she mentioned to me is I should do more exercises of self-conscious exercise. For example, the one where they go, name 4 things in the room. Name 3 things that you sounds that you hear, and then after you finish that few sort of identifications of these things, it brings you back to the present, and it's the same thing that you're doing there. So she's saying that really helps with anxiety and mental health. It helps you to come back to presence, and because you're not so focused on the future worries and also the past issues and mistakes, that's what really helps bring you back to the present and kind of help things mellow out, if you may. And what was I going to say? But that's definitely a really, really good thing. And I think I've lost my train of thought, to be honest. But that's really, really good. That would definitely help a lot of people, I think. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I think that's the other thing I want to mention to you. I think a really good tip that reminded me. So one of the things I used to say a lot, because I worked in hospitality for 10 years, and in one place 10 years straight, and I became very good at training people, and I'm a pretty socially awkward person. When I started, I had trouble even introducing myself to customers. I'd be like, hi, and then be like, I gotta do the shop concept, talk about the products. But then I got so nervous at one time, I even said the product name wrong, and people were like, what? Because I said it was a lemon olive oil sponge, and I said, it's a lemon oil olive sponge, and then they're like, olive sponge, and I was like, yeah, you want to try some? And they were like, I guess. But I train so many people, and like, new people coming to the, like, for example, a lot of them are international people, so English isn't their first language, for example. That makes a lot of room for mistakes.
Yep.
When you're new to like an industry, and like, for example, you've never been in customer service, again, a lot of room for mistake. You might, like, customer service requires a lot of understanding, like how certain words need to be used, or certain words work better than other words, for example. Anyway, so whenever they made mistakes, or they were close to making a mistake, or I can tell when they're anxious and very nervous, the way I calmed them down, I always said, I was like, look, I know you're for sure going to make some mistakes. You're new. It's going to happen. That's how things work, and that's how you improve. I said, I'm going to tell you straight up first, when you make a mistake, I don't want you to start feeling bad about it and just like start going to a spiral. I was like, I want you to acknowledge the mistake for sure and learn from it. And then we're going to move on straight away, and we're going to try to find a solution, because finding a solution, moving on and progressing is what's most helpful out of a mistake. I was like, there's no point in you feeling bad, because none of us are going to get anything nice out of it. And I found that has always made a huge impact on a lot of people. Like, it really makes them, it brings out their confidence in a way. They're like, I can do this. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a mistake, but when it happens, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And like, a lot of shy people end up being like some of the most confident people after that, which is really incredible. And at least
100%.
point about like, I think you have to look at who you surround yourself with, because one of the best advices I've been told is, when you're trying to improve yourself, if you're feeling like you're in a version that you don't like, look at the people you surround yourself with. And like, if they're people with values that you agree with, or values that you want to work towards, who you surround yourself with is the person that you're going to become in the long run.
I forget who said it, so you might know, but there's a phrase that says, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Now, I think you heard that before.
That does kind of sound familiar. Yeah. I think that's a really famous quote, actually.
It's super famous, and I know it's used in the business sense, because I think it was said by some kind of entrepreneur or whatever, but that can ring true with anything, is that if the people you surround yourself with either want you to be somebody that you're not, or, maybe a big thing that people, at least that I speak with, they hold, like, their friends hold them accountable to somebody that they're not. So whether that means that they're trying to recover, they're trying to heal, when people are like, oh, do you remember when you were like this? Or do you remember when you used to be like that? And it's like, not said in a way of progression. It's not said in a way of encouragement. It's a reminder of who you used to be. And people are afraid of losing friendships, especially people who are depressed, because they're inherently lonely by default. But I am the opposite, which is why I feel like sometimes people I obviously have private conversations with people all day, every day. I tell them the opposite probably of what a therapist would tell them, or maybe what they read online, is that friendships or relationships, anything that's bad for you has to go. I don't care if it's a family member. I don't care if it's your best friend in the world.
Yeah, doesn't matter the connection. Yeah.
If it does not matter the connection, because ultimately, if they're trying to hurt you or bring you down or stop you from getting to a place where you're going to feel healthy again, even if it's a temporary thing, even if you're like, look, you are just bad for me right now while I'm trying to heal and get myself back together, and I need to just go and work on this by myself, or whoever, with other people. And when I feel good again, or when I feel healthy enough to have this relationship again, I would love for that door to still be open. Yeah. And I don't see anything wrong with that. But I feel like a lot of people are afraid of losing connections. And if somebody isn't willing to wait for you as a friend while you work on yourself, then they're the wrong friends in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, that was a really good example, because I actually have a friend who's exactly what you described there. When substance abuse got pretty bad, because we used to be each other's wingman, essentially, when we were like trying to find like partners. And so we'd go to events together and we'd be like, yeah, we're each other's wingman. And then we became really close. And he was pretty new to like the scene, like coming out, like he's a bit older than me. And at one point he was like, hey, I know you're going through this stuff, and, I am here for you, but it's starting to affect, like, you not showing up sometimes, or, like you pulling out last minute on plans because of that. it's starting to affect me. It's starting to affect my wellness. I don't know if this is a very healthy thing. He was like, I think we should take a break and then move back and come back to this when you're fully like at a stage where you're a little bit healthier. And, you know, and he was like, and, you know, I'll still be able to like talk to you sometimes and help you. So, but I don't think we should hang out anymore for a while. And I said, I 100% respect that. And I see everything that has happened and like how you come to this conclusion. And I was like, and I fully respect it. And I said, and I think that is the right choice from my end as well. And, you know, and that's like fully like mutual respect. And when in the end, you know, I reached out again and he was like, cool, let's hang out. And, you know, and
I love that.
Yeah. And like, I think that's a perfect example of a very mature, he is a very mature and well regulated person. Because he had like a relationship didn't turn out very well. It was from a very toxic person actually, and he ended up going on a travel, but he was also straight away regulating his emotions very, very quickly. And I was just like, for someone who's just, you know, so new to like coming out so fresh and then like diving into a relationship and then going so hard in it, but then like having it turn out so terribly. I was like, you are beyond amazing. I said like your maturity is astounding. And then he was like, oh, thank you for that. And I was like, no, I mean, you obviously come from either a really good family, like that has like, so I was like, and emotions and like raised you really well. I was like, oh, you're just super like well regulated. Really well. I was like, I would be like throwing a tantrum probably.
The dream to be well regulated.
And for example, you know, when you surround yourself with that people, because like through the podcast, I met someone and he made a really nice, a lot of them are like, a lot of musicians are basically hardworking people, you know, they go through so much stuff. But they also hone themselves to become very positive, like orientated in terms of their mindset. Like I remember I had an off comment where I just said, oh, I have a really bad memory. I was like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I just like, oh, you know, it's always bad. And then he said, oh, I would stop saying that if I were you. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, if you keep saying something that you're not good at is something really, really bad and keep kind of going down on it, like you might just go down that path and continue to get worse. Like if you kind of try to be a bit more positive about it, it might improve. And then that rerouted my mindset and I was like, yeah, I'm going to stop doing that.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about things.
Yeah. Another thing I really want to talk about, and I think you would have a really good, probably like have something really good to say about it is, how did you find like being grounded, like in terms of like having, because I think one of the things that helps people with depression the most isn't so much a solution. Like we're not looking for solutions when we're high in, like, I mean, deep in the mud of it, I guess. I think what we're looking for is one, we need time. And then second of all, I think we need a presence, like a grounding presence, like someone there that doesn't necessarily have to be in your face or in your space, but someone who you know is there and kind of like, kind of holding you down. You know, it's like a grounding presence is what I describe it as.
As in, do I have that person in my life?
I was saying, I guess, like, what do you think about that? Like, has that kind of like stuff been relevant to your journey?
Yeah, this is how my mind works. So I will just unpack it. I am in the mind of, if you have somebody in your life that can do that for you, it is a tremendous bonus and it helps a lot. But it is not the only way to, you know, work on yourself and kind of come out of some of the things that, because for the majority of my life, I have been doing things by myself. I've been figuring it out as I go along, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've fucked a lot of things up. I've hurt myself in the process, but I've learned so much about myself by doing that. It's allowed me to be a much more, I don't want to use the word regulated because it's definitely not, in tune with how I am as a human being. Like, I know what upsets me. I know where I upset other people. And that only comes from, realistically, either A, you fuck it up so badly that you lose a friendship or whatever, and you're like, I'm not doing that ever again. Or you do have the benefit of somebody in your corner who they have to be willing to upset you. And that is the person you need, like your friend, you know, to be able to have that confidence and the courage, because a lot of people would deem that as confrontation when it's not. It's honesty, and it probably came from a place of love. And to have somebody in your corner to be like, you know, I don't think what you're doing is the right move. And early on for me, it was my wife. When we first got together, I was not the person I am today. I was very, very aggressive, still very deep in my, you know, trauma. Realistically, I was going through a lot of stuff. still. And it was very much to the point, she was like, look, I am willing to support you, but you are too dangerous for me. And if you don't fix this, if you don't work this out, then you're going to lose me. And she basically put all of that patience and all of that trust into the relationship because she believed. And I think that's the part, is that if somebody believes you can fix it and somebody believes in you, that is enough. That is enough of an emotion for me to be like, wow, nobody's ever believed in me. I don't even believe in me. So if you do, that gives me the confidence to be like, right, yeah, I need to figure this out. So if you're lucky enough to have that, it is world changing. And it doesn't have to be a partner. It can be a friend.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, someone offered it's a very cute and wholesome tip. They said, like, sometimes when you're going into situations where you're really afraid or you're really uncertain, like, I mean, a very daily example would be like, let's say you have a friend says, I'm starting a new job. I'm so like insecure about it. I don't think I can do this, or I don't know if I'm up for this. They'll say, one thing she liked to do, she says this is the way she described it. She goes, she'll call a friend and she says, hey, I don't have enough confidence for this. Can I borrow your confidence in me? And essentially that friend will go on the splurge and say, you're like this amazing person. I think you can do this because of such and such and such. And then that kind of builds the confidence. And it's like, I have confidence in you. And then you just ride on that until your confidence starts building up again. And it's such 100%. And this is why, like, you know, having the right friends are important, because, you know, imagine telling your friend and they're just like, yeah, you're right. I think you won't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you should do that.
But let's not go there. The other thing I really wanted to talk about, I think I did mention to you when I reached out to you, is, and I feel like for me, it's still very confusing. Like recently, actually, just this year, I experienced it. And the topic is basically, how do you start like a difficult conversation? Like I had someone who I was just chatting to, and I kind of info dumped about the news, because like I was talking about what was happening in the United States, and I didn't realize she was already kind of actually stressed about something, and she was already in a sort of like a depressive mood, but she wasn't showing it, so I didn't quite pick up on it. And as I was talking, she goes, I might need to take a break on this subject. And then she kind of blurted out something, and then she started crying, and I was just like, oh shit. And I was like, and then for a moment I was just like, okay, what do I say? Like, what's the right thing to say in this moment? Like, and I was just like, I obviously apologized first, but then like from there I was like, I don't really know what to say next. You know, I was like, do you want to talk about it? I was like, I'm so sorry. Do you want to like have a rest? Like, do you want to hang up the chat and then, you know, just text or something? But like, to be honest, I always feel like that's a very difficult part of navigating like a friendship. If you had someone that was going through something,
it is. It really is, and it's for both people, because if the friend who is going through something hasn't communicated that to you, and you likewise haven't, like you said, picked up on it or asked a question or whatever it is, you know, you can't. The thing is, you can't go around 100% of the time being incredibly sensitive and in tune to somebody's emotions who isn't showing it. So there is going to be points where that kind of, I wouldn't say friction, but that sort of situation happens. And the way that a lot of the time people, in my opinion, overcomplicate how to have those conversations, or at least how to start that conversation, to kind of set the seed, whatever that seed might be. And it's because I found, my experience, I was afraid of telling the truth, because I was afraid of somebody being like, why are you bothered by that? Like, for example, if your friend was upset about something happening in the US or something else that was going on in her life, like for me, something that would be significant to me might be so insignificant to somebody else. So my truth would sometimes remain hidden. And I just learned to be like, well, whether it's a problem to you or not, it's a big deal to me, and you're my friend. And so I should feel comfortable enough to say these things to you. And I don't need you to necessarily bear that burden, but I just want you to be conscious of it. And that is how I would do things. I would set the seed early and just say, like, you know, if I tell you on Monday, it's probably still going to be true on Friday. So just kind of be sensitive for the next 5 days, and I'll let you know when things have calmed down. Yeah. But it is just getting the confidence. And this goes back to the thing that we've said a couple of times. If you pick the right friends, those types of conversations should be easy to have because
Exactly.
you have mutual love, you have mutual respect for each other. And so if I say something like, I'm extremely sensitive this week, not sure why, it's just how I'm feeling. If I lash out at you, it is not personal. I don't want to lash out at you. If something feels off, I will tell you. And that normally helps because people always believe it's them. So if I was to be like, why the fuck are you talking to me like that? And it's because I'm holding a demon. They're like, holy shit, what have I done wrong? Like in your situation, same thing happened. You approached the subject which you didn't think anything of, and your friend was like, I'm feeling a little bit sensitive to this already, and it's because she had something that she hadn't yet communicated to you. So I feel like it is very much, don't overcomplicate it or overthink it, which is obviously impossible for most people with anxiety. But the truth is always the right way to do things, and the right people will always be receptive of it.
Yes, that's true. So it looks like we're pretty close to the time that you have to go. I was thinking, I love like the way you usually end your videos. Like that's one of the things I love about like the positive message you always leave with like each message is like essentially telling people to stay. Do you want to leave one of those messages with like my viewers about like, like about obviously like us being able to make it is kind of a sign that they can make it too, and to stay with us?
100%. I feel like if people are listening to this and they're able to understand that you and I have both been through things, you have been through things recently, I've been through things kind of throughout my life. And I always treat that as, well, if maybe not belief, but hope. If somebody else out there like me, who I didn't think existed, because when you're in those types of dark places, you do not believe other people like you exist. To hear somebody say, I've coped with it, I've managed it, I'm still here, there's still more for me to do, is, in my opinion, the hope that anybody would need to stick around. Because when you're in that real dark place, and I've been in that dark place a lot, I didn't expect to see my 30th birthday, and yet here I am 5 years later, still living as best as I can. And if I had given up when I wanted to give up, I wouldn't have had the impact on other people that I am currently having on them now. So it might hurt and it might suck, but me and you are both proof that if you can ride that stuff out and have the right people in your corner and realize that there are people like you and I exist to give you hope, then I promise you, no matter how long it will take, you will get there in the end. And you just have to be patient and trust the fact that you will get there in the end. And that should be enough.
That's awesome. That's such a episode. So thank you so much for obviously coming on the show and offering so much of like this, it's one topic I've always wanted to interview someone for and get like more educational about it, and also like obviously get myself educated. So it's been like an incredible honor to be able to one, feature your channel and get more people hopefully to go your direction and spread the word. But yeah, I'm glad that you've gone through everything that you've gone through. Ideally not going through it, but you have come out from the other side, and I'm glad that you're able to kind of start enjoying life a bit more now and actually start to experience different things. And with more time, obviously you'll get to be happier and happier and find I guess essentially receive what you should have received a long time ago from all the hard work that you've put out.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, I said it earlier, but massively well done and hugely proud of you to come out the other side of the things that you have, and to do stuff like this, interview people and dive deep onto topics like this is something you should be incredibly happy about and proud of, because we need more people like you trying to talk about subjects like this. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. And before we obviously log off, obviously if further down the line, I think between gaps, and sometimes I'd like to do more interviews with the same people. So, we could always expand on the topic, and if you have any workshops or whatever, projects that you work on in future, feel free to let me know as well. I'm happy to promote it. always really good to do stuff for good cause.
Awesome. Likewise, once this is ready to go, let me know, and I'll obviously make sure it goes to people, because it's gonna benefit the people that follow me as well. So once it's ready to go, let me know.
Yeah, and Zoom usually has the download link, so I'll give you the download link as well, so you can pretty much like chop up whatever you need and use it on your channel too.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. You too.
I'll talk to you soon.